something with you. It's not going to be from the Torah portion like usual, but it is connected to our calendar. You see, we're starting Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is the new month. And that happens a lot, in case you haven't noticed. But for the Hebrew month that we're starting now means that, I have to finish my sermons. That's the first thing it says. Because this is the month of Elul. Elul is the 1 month before Rosh Hashanah. And Elul has all of these other connections to it. Elul isn't just, I have to finish. It is about some soul searching. Because if you really, really think about it, if Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is about the spiritual power of teshuvah, of turning, of atoning, of repenting, of trying to carve out a new path, well, how do you show up on the day of with no prep and think that I'm going to get anywhere? It doesn't work that way. If we don't go and prepare ourselves and our hearts and our souls, then it probably won't be a surprise that I left the service feeling a little bit better because I had a nice nap. And maybe the rabbi said something meaningful, maybe not. But whatever it is, Elul is this chance for us to say, okay, folks, it's time to get our house in order. Let's try to figure out, who do I want to be when I grow up? And yes, all of us are still growing up, and there's no exceptions to that rule. The person who thinks that I have nothing else to learn, well, they kind of need these holy days the most, I think. So there's something that I was thinking about. There's this famous story in pre-state Israel. It was a rabbi who was in Jerusalem. His name is Aryeh Levin. And he was called the holy man of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem. And he spent his whole adult life in the land of Israel, where he visited prisoners. He visited members of the Jewish underground imprisoned in the central prison of Jerusalem in the Russian compound during the British Mandate. So again, this is just a little bit before the state of Israel is actually founded. But lots and lots of Jews have been making their way and trying to build up a Jewish state in the land of Israel. And his goal was to bring them comfort and to bring a little bit of food, a little nourishment, a little spiritual nourishment for all of these folks who are still in prison. And once, after Passover, some of the Jewish prisoners told Rabbi Aryeh that although the Seder was really quite special and lovely, but something important was missing. Remember, it's Passover in this prison. And they said to him, because they were in prison, they couldn't open the door for Elijah. It was really sad for them. That act invites redemption. Redemption is something that we seek. Elijah, don't forget, has another job aside from, coming to our Seders at the end of the night. In case you don't get to the rest of the Seder after dinner, there's a part where you open up the door for Elijah. Just saying. So when you open up the door for Elijah, Elijah's other job is to announce the coming of the Messiah. In the liberal Jewish community, some of us believe in a personal Messiah. Some of us will talk about a messianic era. If we all do our part, doesn't matter to me, really. But the tradition will say that Elijah is going to announce the coming of the Messiah. So if you think about the context of where these prisoners were, there was no enslavement more absolute than the inability to come to bring forward a taste of redemption by opening the door and waiting for Elijah to come. So Rabbi Aryeh says to all these prisoners, he says, every individual is in a prison of his own self. He cannot leave by going out of the house, only by passing through the door of the heart. He can't leave through the front door. It's only the door of the heart. That's the most important. And to make an opening for himself in his own heart that anyone can do, even a prisoner who's behind bars. And then he will be in a true place of spiritual freedom, no matter who is locking us up. This is the time, Elul, that we get to do some work on our hearts. This is the time when we get to figure out, how do we want to live in the world? How do we want to be? Elul, the month before these days of awe. We call them high holy days. It drives me crazy. I don't know what that means. Days of awe? I understand awe, where I'm stopped in my tracks, where I need to really think. I need to figure out. High holy days? That just tells me we have to get dressed up. Days of Awe is something very different. And it reminds us about this turning, this idea of how are we going to make our lives matter, right? That's the expression. It's not just about making a living. It's about making a life. How are we going to make a life in this world? In this world. Not wait for a reward in the next. I just had a great conversation with the pastor at Second Baptist, the African-American church that's just down the street. And he was really so sincere in asking me, am I concerned about salvation? And I gave him my typical Jewish answer, like, no. Because it's about the here. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I believe that something is going to happen, and I hope it's for the good. But it's about the now. This is where we need to focus. And I appreciated his concern. And it was an opening door of a real conversation. But we have to open our hearts now. Not so that there's a reward, but so that there's a change in the world and there's a change in ourselves, and we can bring out better change in one another. I handed out a sheet, or as you came in, there was a little sheet. There's a tradition of reading Psalm 27 every day, once a day, for the whole month of Elul, and in fact, even going through the end of Sukkot. So if you want to take a look at this, I want to share a couple of little parts with you in this idea of preparing our hearts. Because Psalm 27 has lots of different things, and I think we can hold on to it. I'm going to skip around, but I'm going to start. It says of David, because that's the traditional author, according to Jewish tradition. Almost all the Psalms, are written by King David. It says, of David, Adonai is my light and my victory. From where shall I feel fright? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. From whom shall I feel terror? I think we tend to feel terror and concern over lots of things that might not really be so important. Have you noticed that? Not him. Okay. When evildoers approach me in battle to feed on my flesh, my pursuers, my adversaries, they have stumbled, they have fallen down. If a camp encamps against me, my heart will not fear. If a war rises against me, in this I would trust. No matter what's coming at me, I'm going to trust. And this is what I'm going to trust. One thing have I sought from Adonai, how I long for it, that I may live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life. That must be a great place, to live in the house of Adonai. I want to live there. I think I have moments, my higher moments. A lot of times I just kind of hope to get there. I want to live in that space, but it's also sometimes I wonder, it's not really all up to me. And I don't mean when I say that it's up to God, because I don't think it's really up to God. I think God has given me the tools. God has given you the resources. I think we have those reservoirs of strength and compassion if we tap into them. I think it depends on how we do the taking care of each other thing. Because I can be locked out of that house if the people in it are going to be hurtful. How do I create safe space and get to enter into the house of God? Spend time in that palace. Verse 5, you might hide me in your sukkah on a chaotic day. Hide me in the hiding places of your tent. This is, by the way, like a tent. This is like a tabernacle, not just because it's a sanctuary and we have a Torah scroll, but in our tradition of journeying and wandering, the tent is where God dwelled and it's where we came together. Verse 6, now my head rises high above my enemies round about, and in your tent I'll offer offerings to the sound of a truah. That's the sound of the shofar. I shall sing, I shall chant, I'm going to dance a hora. And if we go down a little further, it's very clear about asking God, I'm going to feel vulnerable sometimes. And in verse 9, don't hide your face from me, because I need you. I need to know that there's more out there. Don't hide your face from me. Don't turn away from me. Don't forsake me. Don't abandon me, God of my deliverance. And I don't think God ever does, but I feel that we feel that. We sometimes feel that. I'm not saying that that's just on us, because that's not so nice. I don't think God does turn away, but sometimes we have a hard time finding the channel, right? We've talked about that before. Young people don't know what I mean by this, but do you remember when you actually had to turn a channel? And if you don't hit it just right, they're static. You're right? Folks of a certain age don't know what a static is because you just give them a button. But you have to work at finding the right channels sometimes, and I find that to be really compelling. But here's the thing that I really want to tell you about. Verse 12, don't hand me over to my enemies. Fine. 13, had I not the faith that I would see the goodness of God in the land of life, and then our translator gives you 3 dots, because there's no consequence to this. It just is a pause. So the 3 dots are recognizing that we should stop after that. Had I not the faith that I would see the goodness of God in the land of life? Had I not the faith? Well, I'm a little uncomfortable with the translation because on some level, had I not the faith, kind of says if I'm struggling, then I'm going to keep struggling. And maybe there's a judgment call of people that aren't so sure in their faith. But I think we all experience this. Sometimes it's at a high point of, I've always had the faith, and I couldn't imagine what life would be like if I didn't. Or it could be interpreted the other way. You know, that it could be a difficulty thing. It could be a challenge, another stumbling block if I didn't have the faith. And if you look over to the Hebrew, towards the middle, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom, you'll see a little 13, verse 13. So that translation, had I not the faith, it's lule, right? That's how they translate lule. It's kind of hard to translate, but you see all those dots in it? If you look at a traditional book of Psalms, it's going to have all of those dots, and it's screaming, interpret me. Because something is unusual here. Had I not the faith that I would see the goodness of God, I sometimes don't have that faith and that clarity of vision. But if you look at the letters for Lule, and if you go backwards, anybody can figure it out? Elul, the Hebrew month, now. So Elul is the time where I can take my Lule kind of orientation. Maybe I don't have such great faith and I don't see the best in people. I don't give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to be easily agitated. But Elul is going to say, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They couldn't have meant that. Lule means, somebody's going to get under my skin and I'm going to jump at them and I'm not going to necessarily listen to them. Maybe if they're hurting, but I'm kind of feel like I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm hurting a little bit more. Now we're comparing our hurts. But Elul is going to say, let's sit together. Lule is going to be the questioning, challenging, not so strong. But this whole month of Elul is to help us get a little bit further, closer, stronger, taller, however we want to see it, so we can be ready for Rosh Hashanah with an open heart. Cut away the thickening around the heart. Be a little bit more vulnerable, which is risky. Let a little bit more in and enter instead of being closed, which is kind of how we're trained, because we're supposed to be strong. And strong means not vulnerable. But the most growth comes through our vulnerabilities. We are strongest in our weakest places. I'm convinced of that because, frankly, I've had my share too. And I don't know how I would do it if I didn't have this, Lule. But I'm going to look at Elul because there's more to do. There's a journey out there. And I have a whole year ahead, a new year ahead. And I can't really walk into that new year without a sense of being grounded in the start of it. And then I'm going to fall, I'm going to fail because I'm human. But then I'm going to get another chance. Every year, multiple times a year. That's what I'm saying. So when we look at the orientations right now, we can look at the Lule, had I not known, something kind of negative, maybe not having clarity. And then Elul is the stretching. So let's stretch. A whole month to show up before these Jewish holy days, ready and prepared to make a difference in my life, to make a difference in your life. We can take care of each other and walk that journey just a little bit better, a little bit differently, a little bit gentler, a little bit kinder. And then, as I say almost every single week, that changes everything. That can change everything. And I absolutely believe that to be true. Let's turn in the Siddur and move